Hey everybody, do you struggle with accents and dialect work? A lot of actors do. They can do a few accents maybe that they're familiar with, but when they're trying to learn a new one, it becomes very difficult. So in this video, I'm going to give you some pointers on how you can increase your efficacy of learning new dialects or accents. Dialects are tricky. I used to fall out of dialects all the time. I would start with a French dialect and end up Italian, or start with a Southern American dialect and end up doing a New York dialect, and I would just slip from one to the next because I wasn't practiced enough. But over time, I got really good at distinguishing the differences between the dialects, and part of it really is just knowing what those differences are. Once you nail those, then you can pretty much learn any dialect pretty quickly. And now I loved doing dialects, and in fact, every time I start a new character, I always try to find, is there a dialect? Is there a regionalism? Is there something that's different than my voice that I can add to them? Because that's the exciting part of acting for me, is making a new character from a different place, out of my body and my voice. Now you might wonder what's the difference between a dialect and an accent. Follow the link on your screen right now to watch a video that I did a while back about the difference between a dialect and an accent. If you're interested in that, that video will explain the difference. Links down below. So whenever you're learning a new dialect, it's important that you go to a source. You gotta listen to people who speak that dialect. Whether it's in person or on video, you have to hear it in order to mimic it. Now, as actors, we're told not to borrow too much from other actors' performances and stuff like that. But if you find somebody who speaks that language, it is okay to mimic them. After you start learning dialects, you'll start to discover which actors have those dialects, and then you can go watch their movies. If you're doing an Australian accent, go to Nicole Kidman or Toni Collette and watch a movie where they're actually speaking in their actual Australian accent voice, because they often do American accents, so you don't want to watch one of those. But listen to them in an interview, for instance, and just mimic them. Repeat every word that they say like they say it. And it might sound weird at first, but again, it's okay to mimic them. And after a while, it'll start to feel natural in your own mouth. Now, you got to be careful when you're looking, like Meryl Streep, for instance, does a ton of different dialects for different movies. And it's okay to learn the basics of a dialect by watching somebody do a dialect, but everybody has their drawbacks and their flaws when they're pronouncing words and performing, and they may miss some things. So it's better to find a native speaker. If you're going to be doing dialect work on a regular basis, you should learn phonetics. You should at least learn what the different phonetic vowel sounds and consonant sounds and the symbols look like and sound like. For instance, a long O as opposed to an ah or a, the schwa sound. Phonetics are a language in and of themselves, and it takes a little bit of studying to get it down, but it will be very helpful. It's like reading music. Once you learn it, it comes in very handy in a lot of situations. Each dialect can be broken down into a series of phonetic rules. Learn what the consonants and the vowels sound like on certain words. So words that rhyme with here, for instance, are always going to say hair. You're going to say hair. Or anything that has the O sound, like bone or throne, is going to be very throne, bun, that kind of thing. So you're finding the substitutions for the vowels and the consonants. And phonetics can help you with that, but you can look at a phonetic chart and see, like, every time I say this, a word that rhymes with this, it's going to sound like this. You should understand what glottal means, in the throat. You should understand what the placement of the back of the throat, like, oh, I'm talking like a back of the throat. Your palate is up high or up front, like brassy, up front, teethy, because some accents are in the back of the throat and some are in the front of the teeth area, in your embouchure, this part of your face. You should learn how to roll your R's, because a lot of dialects and languages have R rolls. So knowing that, looking at those phonetic symbols and charts, you can find these online. You can find them in phonetic books at the library, and just sit down there and practice. Go through your script and find those words, circle them, and practice always saying those vowels that way, always saying those consonants that way. It's going to sound weird at first, but the more you listen to people, the more you'll see that it's not so weird. When you're doing an accent for improv, or where you're making something up or trying to convince somebody that you're a native speaker just by talking, you got to nail that accent. You got to know all the little nuances, and you have to be very practiced in it. That comes a little later. When you're doing a show, a movie, a play, you have lines. So all it's important is that you can say those lines with the accent. You don't have to be able to riff a lot. So just concentrate on your lines, not on knowing every little nuance of the language. Find a dialect coach. If you work in a union house and you are asked to do a dialect, a lot of the times they will bring in a coach, and you should definitely enjoy those sessions. These coaches will find flaws in your dialects, and they will help you pinpoint them and give you things to practice as well. One of the coaches that I've worked with here in Seattle has actually traveled abroad and recorded native speakers saying the same piece of poetry.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
And then she can go back and refer to that recording or play it for you so that you can hear it. And it has all the different phonetic symbols and combinations of letters that are in the language. So there's an example of each word in there, or each case in there. But a coach can pinpoint those problems. You might need to pay somebody to be a coach, and you might need to seek a coach out, but definitely working with somebody else to have another set of ears on your language is going to be very beneficial. Your coach, incidentally, does not need to be a native speaker. They just need to be versed in that dialect. Now, the next thing you should do is record yourself saying your lines with the accent and play them back. Often when we are doing dialects, it sounds a lot better in our own head than it does when you actually listen to it back. And you can realize that sometimes you need to be crisper with your consonants, or you need to put your tone a little bit further back in your throat. Dialects and accents also have different pitches, different tonalities, cadences, things like that. So learning those is important as well. You also want to make sure you know the vernacular of a particular region or dialect that you're from. Use the slang from that region and understand what they're talking about. I just did a production of Billy Elliot not too long ago, and they use the Geordie Newcastle accent in there, and they say words like bairn for boy and granny instead of grandma, that kind of thing. So especially if you're trying to convince somebody that you are a native speaker, you want to make sure you're using the proper lingo. But often in the scripts you'll see those words, and knowing what they mean is kind of part of the game. And then the last thing I would suggest is just speak all the time. When you're at home, when you're doing the dishes, when you're talking to your friends, adopt that accent and speak it all the time. The more you can become relaxed in it, the more it will sound natural. Once you've nailed a dialect or a particular dialect, start practicing switching back and forth between your native speaking voice and the dialect, and other dialects as well, because that's only going to help you learn them a little bit better and get better at playing multiple characters in a show, things like that. There are a lot of online resources for dialects. YouTube is a great online resource. Just search the name of the language or the area and the word dialect, and you can also add phonetics into the search term, and you'll see all kinds of videos and blogs and whatnot of people that speak that dialect. They'll tell you how to do it in a video. They'll tell you how to pronounce all the different words, what the different words mean, and vocabulary. All it takes is just a Google search, and you can find pretty much any dialect out there. So I hope some of these tips were helpful for you, and I hope that you can start nailing some dialects. Let me know if you're having trouble with any dialects down in the comments below, and I'll see if I can send you some references.